Okay, as you know, the ESRI published this morning their latest housing affordability report, and there are some very stark findings in the document. Probably the headline figure for me is 1 in 4 renters have an affordability challenge. They're paying rents in excess of 30% of their net disposable income. And in fact, if you look at the detail of the report, you'll find a heavy concentration of those renters paying high rents in the lowest income cohorts. Over 25% are struggling. The report also notes, as you'll have seen in some of the media headlines, a significant challenge for people who would be in the middle or the just above middle end of the income cohorts. But again, very significant numbers of people struggling with high rents. Single people are particularly disadvantaged, lone parents are particularly disadvantaged, and people under the age of 34. All of that, of course, shows the kind of affordability challenge we have. The report also highlights the fact that only 1 in 3 people under the age of 40 own their own home, and we've had a very significant increase in younger people being forced to live at home with their parents. And what all of that says to me is that this government is failing both renters and particularly young people who want to own their own home. It's important to note that that report is based on data from 2019. Since then, both rents and house prices have increased by over 25%, so the crisis now would only be worse. And the reason, of course, was very clear to see all of this week. Darragh O'Brien and another 2 schemes way behind target, again promoting policies that will push up house prices, doing nothing for renters. And we have a government that time and time again is failing renters, is failing homeowners, is failing those people at risk of losing their home. And I've said any number of times, and you will bore me saying it over and over again, until we have a change of government, this isn't going to change. We've had 3 years of Darragh O'Brien, 7 years of Fianna Fáil in government in one form or another, 12 years of Fine Gael, and the cost of renting and the cost of buying a home has never been higher. We need an election, we need change of government, and we need a new housing plan.
Owen, given that housing targets are likely to be missed this year, and housing analysts are saying that those targets aren't even high enough as it is, what more can be done to build more homes, and how can we actually do that in terms of real terms? How can we actually build those houses with shortfalls in construction workers?
And keep in mind, independent housing policy experts and analysts have been telling government that their targets were too low, both at the end of the last government and from the start of this government. So that's not news to anybody. The only significant development this week is the Irish Daily Mail have reported that the Department of Finance are now finally saying the same thing, which is even if the government meet their targets this year, it's nowhere near enough. So the first thing is they have to have an objective assessment of need. They have to say this is the number of homes that are needed every single year to tackle the crisis. We have a rough idea of what that assessment of need would be, but it needs to be published, it needs to be updated independently each year. And then government needs to set new targets. So for example, we need at least 20,000 new public homes a year, every year, and probably more than that. That means a significant capital uplift for the Department of Housing and approved housing bodies. It means stripping away the red tape and bureaucracy that's slowing down the delivery of homes. But crucially, it means government has to stop implementing or beefing up policies that push up house prices. Like Darragh O'Brien was clapping himself in the back yesterday around his highly controversial shared equity loan. Now the first thing is it's so far behind target this year, it's nothing to shout about. But that policy will drive up house prices. Every independent economist and housing policy analyst in the country will tell you that. Likewise, we have government announcing or re-announcing, should I say, their new cost rental subsidy under the nice new acronym of STAR. Darragh O'Brien is giving himself a star, having delivered a pitiful number of cost rental homes since becoming minister. But that's now a €200,000 subsidy for developers, originally 150,000. What's that going to do? Push up prices even further. And not only has he increased the subsidy, but he's going to set the housing agency, the LDA, private developers, approved housing bodies all against each other chasing this stock. So government needs to do more to deliver good quality social and affordable homes with its own money on its own land, and it has to stop adding fuel to the fire of rising house prices and rents by stopping these crazy policies that Darragh O'Brien seems to love so much.
But when you say 20,000, is they social homes here? Is that what you say?
Public homes, social, affordable rental and affordable purchase.
Right, well, they can barely hit 30,000 full stop. You say put more money in the Department of Housing budget. They can't spend what they've been given. So how is it realistic to say that they should be building 20,000 public homes a year? If you were in government now, what would your overall target be for next year?
Yeah. And look, they're fair questions. So the first thing is you have to start with what's needed, and we need at least 20,000 social, affordable rental and affordable purchase homes every year. Why is it that the Department of Housing has had a chronic underspend under Darragh O'Brien? Because there is too much bureaucracy imposed by the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform and the Department of Housing on our local authorities and approved housing bodies and small and medium-sized building contractors. We're blue in the face saying this year after year after year. We've submitted detailed proposals to government as to how to fix that. Unless you strip away that red tape and bureaucracy, you won't be able to accelerate the delivery of homes. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we have, at a conservative estimate, 40 to 50,000 vacant homes across the state. And yet we are not giving our local authorities and approved housing bodies the money and the power to acquire them and either rent them out for social affordable rental or sell them on. Darragh O'Brien was clapping himself on the back for a second time this week on Monday with his figures for the refurbishment grant. How many refurbishment grants have been drawn down in almost a year of that scheme being up and running? Is it 4? And actually the target for that scheme is only about 600 a year anyway. So far more use of the vacants. And then the third thing is, and again we've been screaming about this for years, we have companies across the country, public and private, who have really high grade new building technologies and modular building technologies. They can't get an audience with the Minister and the Department of Housing, let alone a contract. So if you increase the targets, if you increase the budget, if you cut the red tape, and if you have an equally important focus on vacants and new building technologies, I think you could move towards 20,000 a year social, affordable and affordable rental very, very quickly.
We mentioned red tape in deeper and in housing. That's civil servants, that's not the government. So what makes you think that if you were in government you'd be able to get around that way? Because the civil servants aren't going to change. Or are they?
That's a matter for government. So the first thing is Michael McGrath is in charge of the Department of Finance. Michael McGrath, if he and the Taoiseach in the Department of Housing wanted to reform the way in which to deliver public housing, could do it tomorrow. That is a decision of government. And far too often this government likes to hide behind officials when in fact these are policy decisions. You had Simon Coveney, you had Eoin Murphy, you had Darragh O'Brien all undertake reviews of the approval process for delivery of social affordable homes. It completely ignored the views of frontline local authority staff and approved housing bodies as well as ourselves in opposition on how to reform it. And that is because they're happy to have the system work the way it is. So I don't accept for a moment that if a government, from the Taoiseach to the Minister for Finance to the Minister of Housing, wanted to reform that process, they couldn't do so. And we're not talking about being reckless, by the way. In fact, under our proposals, stripping away the bureaucracy would save money, because every 12-month delay on a public housing project increases the costs on that project by 10 to 15%. So the rules that are being imposed at present by government and the civil service, put in place after the Celtic Tiger, are now actually costing the taxpayer more, as well as slowing down the delivery of homes and forcing an increased number of people into homelessness. So, do I think it would be easy? No, I don't. Do I think it's doable? Yes, I do.
What sort of examples of bureaucracy are you talking about?
Yeah, so there's a 4-stage process in the Department of Housing. So the first thing is, if you want to deliver a project, you've got to get stage 1 approval. That can take 6 months. Then you have to get planning. That's the quickest part of it, particularly if the local authority gives itself planning. Then there's a thing called design approval, where 2 sets of architects, one of the Customs House and one of the local authority, argue over where do the bathroom windows go, where do the skirting boards go, what's the orientation of the access road. And the Department of Housing's architects never even visit the site, probably don't even know the topography. After that's finally agreed, and that can take another 6 months plus after planning, they then have this insane process called cost appraisal. So you get a local government official and a Department of Housing official guessing, what do we think a private building contractor will bid for this job in an open tendering process? The Department of Housing looks backwards, what did this used to cost? The Department of Housing looks forward, what's it likely to cost? Both of them are guessing. Until you go out to tender, you don't know what the price is. And all of that takes 18 to 24 months before you even lay a brick in the ground. I do not accept that it should take, in some cases, 5 years for standard public housing projects. And you take St Michael's Estate, those of you old enough to remember, when did Eoin Murphy announce the 500 social affordable apartments in St Michael's Estate? 2018. When will they actually be built and people move in? Probably 2027, according to the latest estimates. 10 years. It is absolutely criminal. And all of this has been, discussed at great length in the Oireachtas Housing Committee. Everybody knows what the problem is. We need government to make a decision and make it much, much easier, quicker and more cost effective to deliver social affordable homes.
ESRI report today also shows that in terms of affordability, Ireland actually fares better than many European countries. How do you square that with what you say constantly in the Dáil that we're in the grips of a high housing crisis?
Well, I think if you're a renter anywhere in the country and you're paying 40% of your take-home pay on rent in a country that has the highest food prices in Europe, second highest energy prices in Europe, doesn't have universal public health care, doesn't really have universal secondary or third level education, and cripples working people with cost of childcare and cost of insurance, I don't think they care what the rents are in Berlin or Paris. We have, first of all, some of the highest rents in real terms in the European Union. People's gross incomes might be higher, but the costs after they pay for all of the other things in terms of their take-home pay are actually lower. And rents have been rising at a faster rate here than in almost any other European city or country. So I think the report is really interesting. I'm not disputing the findings, but it's important to understand the ESRI doing very dry technical analysis, an analysis that is correct in my view, and then actually asking the question, so what does that mean for real people? And what the report today tells us is 1 in 4 renters is paying more than 30% of their take-home pay on rent, in some cases 40 to 50%. It's telling us, for example, that if you're a lone parent, you're even more likely to be paying over 30%. If you're a single person, over paying 30%. So I think the cross-country comparisons are okay, but they don't give you the full rounded picture of, first of all, what's happening for renters, and also, crucially, what's happening for cost of living crisis. What I'll also say is the report doesn't differentiate between social renters and private renters, because in order to make the cross-country comparisons, the 140,000 social renters are in there as well. And I think if you stripped out the social renters and you made a straight comparison of private renters here to private renters across Europe, our rents are higher, the rent-to-income ratios will be higher, and the affordability challenge for renters will be worse.
The Department of Housing released the commencement figures today for the month of June. They're up 25% compared to the same period last year. In the first 6 months of this year, they're also up considerably. What do you make of those figures?
Look, obviously more commencement is a good thing. The problem is, even with those increases, we're not going to get anywhere near the overall 50,000 new homes we need every year. What I'm also concerned about is the Minister has yet to publish his Q1 or Q2 social housing and affordable housing output. So, for example, last year government, well, actually not government, the private sector exceeded overall expectations in terms of new builds, but government fell short of their social affordable targets. So until we see not only the overall number of new homes delivered this year, but the breakdown of those in terms of social and genuinely affordable, we won't know to what extent those month-on-month figures are actually going to see this crisis get better. And again, I suppose I go back to that story in yesterday's Daily Mail. The Department of Finance are now telling the government, even if they hit their target of public and private sector output of 29,000 units this year, it's nowhere close to the 50,000 that are required, and it won't even begin to dent the crisis that we have. So always welcome more commencements, but there's more to the analysis than just those monthly figures.
Okay.